Thanks for tuning in to the HR Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda. The HR Uprising is focused on helping forward-thinking people professionals deliver real lasting value in their organisations. I'm a chartered psychologist, speaker and trainer, and recently authored the best-selling business book, How to Be a Change Superhero. My day job is founder and CEO of software and training business Actus. This gives me the opportunity to work with other businesses like yours. We are focused on building a better workplace for people wherever they are located, with the help of our performance, learning and talent management software and our training and consultancy services. Every week on the podcast, I will be covering different topics and challenges, joined by relevant experts and real-life people professionals. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy and get value from this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's HR Uprising podcast. And this week I'm going to focus in as a solo episode on the topic of how we might want to re-energise performance. We have lots of people downloading information from our website on managing performance and dealing with underperformance. And it strikes me, I've been doing quite a lot of training in this area, that there is now almost a slightly different type of underperformance, as in it's not a traditional person who isn't delivering against their job role. It's not your classic, they need training necessarily. It's maybe they're just exhausted or just lower energy. So they are not performing at the level they were previously or you think they're capable of. And this is something which I believe is quite current. Maybe it's the natural knock-on from the pandemic in terms of that. And I thought it's worth just exploring that and thinking, what can we do to think about energising performance? So whether we're HR or whether we're line managers, what sort of things we might do. So I've run this as a webinar and you'll be able to access that from our webinars on YouTube, and I'll put the link in the show notes if you wanted to go and see the slides that we went through. But typically people, what drives high performance? Lots of the things that people talk about are your typical intrinsic, extrinsic motivators. So for those of you who are less familiar with what they are, intrinsic motivation, this is your sort of Daniel Pink stuff. So if you are doing something that you feel passionate about, you're actually interested in. So it's almost what intrinsically is interesting to you about that job or that activity or that task, that you're intrinsically motivated in doing it. When people enjoy what they do, they are more likely to put in the effort and the time required to be really good at it, and they're probably going to spend longer doing it as well. Other intrinsic motivators are things like autonomy, which is an interesting one we don't always think about, but I think this is very relevant in terms of line managers. So are we giving people the clarity, but also the freedom to make decisions and can have control over their work? Now, it's interesting because in this hybrid environment that many of us work in, you can almost have too much autonomy or not enough guidance. So you've got to get that balance with the extrinsic motivators, which are things like clear goals and expectations. But certainly whenever I ask what causes people's performance to go off the boil, without exception, someone will say micromanagement, so the opposite of autonomy. So people want to feel autonomous, to have freedom to make decisions and have control over their work. Other motivators are things like mastery, being able to improve and achieve a high level of skill. Now, these motivators, not everybody is equally motivated by all of these things, but they do play a part. Having people the opportunity to learn and grow. So these all start to resonate with engagement questions, don't they? But continuous learning and development in terms of improving your skill is crucial for maintaining high performance. So it could be that people feel they've plateaued. That might be having an impact. And then finally, having a sense of purpose. So understanding the larger purpose behind what we're doing, how it contributes to it. And that can be a really powerful motivator. So people who see their work as meaningful are more likely to be dedicated and perform higher levels. And that's where you would see things like if you're setting objectives with people, which, as I said before, is an extrinsic motivator, helping people understand as a SMART objective what the purpose, how relevant it is, what is it doing in terms of the business goals or the wider goals. That gives people a sense of purpose and motivation. So those are your intrinsic motivators. And I guess Those are not hugely easy to influence as a line manager, but they are influenceable as line manager or HR. So making sure that people are in the job that is a good fit for their personality and their interests is relevant. Giving people the opportunity to learn and grow, to master their role, to develop their skills, giving people that sense of purpose, and also making sure they're not being micromanaged are ways in which we can ensure that the intrinsic motivation is covered for somebody within their role. So let's move on to extrinsic motivators now. So these are more classical how we manage people. And essentially you're talking about clear goals and expectations and quality feedback. So helping people understand what they're doing right, but also understanding what they could do even better. So this means we need line managers who've got the ability to coach and deliver feedback. And if you've listened to this podcast before, you'll definitely have heard me talk about this. Goals and feedback is one of the most, clear goals and feedback is one of the most commonly cited in all of the research literature ways of driving high performance. So if you aren't doing that with your people, then it's definitely time to do so. And then also, to a degree, extrinsic motivators, things like reward and recognition, certainly being recognised for things, but being recognised in a way that people like to be recognised. Not everybody likes very public recognition, for example. And also reward. Is reward aligned with performance appropriately? So it could be financial incentives and bonuses. However, they need to be aligned with your intrinsic motivators. And many of us have heard of hygiene factors, which was Hertzberg's work back in the 60s, where he found that things like pay rises, they weren't necessarily long-term motivators. They were maybe, they would take away a demotivator, but they didn't necessarily create long-term motivation, whereas goals and feedback are much more long-term. Then let's look at personal attributes. So I guess you recruit for this. You know the old adage, we recruit for attitude and then develop skills. Well, these are people who've got resilience, the ability to bounce back from setbacks, self-discipline, they have a growth mindset, and their values are aligned with the working environment. Because actually, if they're not a good fit, so this is again a bit about the good fit, a bit like linking with our intrinsic motivators. But resilience are things that we can develop, and we can also become exhausted. Self-discipline is about time management, people being able to know what they need to do and when they need to do it. Really important in hybrid environments, again, because it's slightly less structured. There are other things that could be different and distracting around the edges. Growth mindset, have we got an environment and a culture where people feel able to embrace challenges, learn from criticism, and see that they are developing? Mistakes are about learning as opposed to failure. So having the right personal attributes, and this would maybe, you recruit for that, but people's resilience, things outside of work can affect them. So we may need to support these as line managers and help people, coach them around those, help them develop their resilience, encourage people to look after themselves. We've done loads of episodes on things like well-being. So make sure that people are able to bounce back, recharge themselves, because it may not be just things at work that are affecting them, as things outside of work are obviously going to play in. And then finally, our fourth driver of high performance is the working environment. So have we got a supportive culture which people feel able to collaborate, they can innovate? That culture is going to make a difference, and that is very heavily influenced by the style of your line manager. Have they got the resources and tools that allow them to perform efficiently and effectively? Classic engagement question. Do they feel that they have the right work-life balance? Do they feel they have to be glued to their desk all day, every day? Or do they feel able to get balance and then not get on the way to burnout? And then, of course, leadership and management. So inspirational leaders can really impact performance, and effective management who give that clear expectation, who provide those extrinsic motivators and the coaching around the edges are really key. So those are your basic four drivers of high performance. And I thought it's worth stepping back when we're thinking about this, and we'll look at this later in terms of energy and performance. What do we need to do to help people feel more motivated? And with motivation will come energy. So are they in a role that is intrinsically motivating? Do they know what that is? Do we know what that is? Are the extrinsic motivators in place in terms of our goals and objectives? They know clearly what to do. In terms of personality and attitude, have they got the support? Have they got the resilience? Are they developing those personal attributes? And have we got the right working environment to drive that high performance? So why do I think this is particularly topical right now? Well, I was reflecting on this and I feel that there are a number of compounding factors outside at the moment that maybe weren't there or weren't so evident back in the day, 15 years ago when I was in an office every day. I don't really feel that all of these were there. So, I mean, we have this remote hybrid working, which is very much the way we work now for many of us, which is great in many, many ways, but it's a double-edged sword. So does that mean that people feel disconnected or detached and not energised by the people they work with because everything's been done virtually, or they might feel quite isolated? In terms of your work and life, this whole sort of weaving together, it absolutely has its benefits in terms of us being able to go and put the washing on while we're at home. But on the flip side of it, there's no delineation. People, when I ran the webinar, people were saying they miss almost that commute where they could just have that headspace to and from work. And I know people talk about virtual commutes, but that's, actually having that opportunity to delineate between work and life was probably recharging for people, and it allowed people to compartmentalise, and it can now be hard to get away from work in many ways. There's lots in terms of just thinking about the challenges of the generation with things like the cost of living crisis. You've got dual parenting, sandwich generation, lots of people who now both parties work compared to say 20 years ago, and they need to for financial reasons, and maybe they are also looking after parents and children. That's really challenging and it's going to drain your energy. So anybody then on top of that, then there's a lot going on outside of work that's going on for people that is going to affect their energy. I think there are differences in terms of the workforce expectations. As new generations come into the workforce, they all have different expectations on how they use their energy. Does social media play a part in draining us or recharging us? We've got a political and global climate. People say to me quite often, I've heard someone last week saying they're waking up in the middle of the night worried about the situation, the wars out there. And the other thing that I wonder is, do people actually have a bit of compassion fatigue? If you were a line manager and we've done all the, you knew you had to be very empathic during COVID and this, that and the other, but actually that's all got to continue, keeping on giving and keeping on supporting. Now, actually, I know that is what line managers should do in terms of coaching and supporting people, but it's still exhausting. So that is going to affect the energy of our managers, and obviously you guys listening, HR professionals, we could have compassion fatigue. That would be completely understandable given the climate. It's been pretty much relentless for the past 5 years. So I think energy is something that we really need to pay attention to, because burnout causes long-term problems and people think they can keep on going. But if you refer to the pressure performance curve, if you want to look it up, it's Williams 1994 is it? I think it came out, and he has this pressure performance curve, which is quite interesting. And again, if you go to the web or the YouTube, you'll be able to see an image of it. But it starts out in terms of if you imagine your axis, you've got your performance up the y-axis, and you've got your level of pressure along the x-axis. You've got boredom in terms of at the bottom of this. Then you've got comfort. And then you go into stretch. Now at stretch is where people's performance starts to go up really quite effectively. But the problem is you go beyond this and you hit strain and overwhelm, and that's when serious health problems happen, breakout and burnout. So we really need to help people avoid tipping over from stretch into strain. And sometimes it happens without them realising. We get tired, start to make poor decisions. And if you hit overwhelm, that's when it's serious health problems. And it's not like people just come back really quickly from that sort of thing. So prevention is definitely the right place. And we want to try and keep people energised. So they don't want to be comfort zone, they don't want to be bored, but they don't want to be in strain tipping into overwhelm. And whenever I've done questionnaires on this with people, I've tended to find that it's almost that you've got the typical bell curve. A chunk of people are bored in comfort zone, and then quite a lot of people are tipping into overwhelm. So it's pretty common and not a great place to be. What can we do about this? I've developed what I call my MEP grid, which is Managing Energy and Performance Grid. Now you can download an infographic on this from the show notes, which will be easier for you because it is a 9-box grid. But it's a 9-box grid which isn't about talent management. It's a 9-box grid which we're talking, again, graphically, I'm afraid I've got another graph here to think about. We're talking about motivation and energy going up the y-axis, and then performance going along the bottom. And what I thought about is it's a little bit, if any of you have ever done situational leadership, the Hershey-Blanchard type thing, it's some of that inspiration came from that, but that only has 4 types of management style. What I was thinking is, how would you need to slightly adjust your style as a line manager based on where you perceived people to be in terms of their motivation and their performance? So if you think, I'm going to label these 9 boxes from the bottom left going across the bottom to the bottom right, and then the middle going across there. So we go 9, so which means that box 9 is in the top right hand corner. So going across the bottom, basically low motivation and energy and growing levels of performance. So I would say low motivation and energy and low performance. Well, that is clearly underperformance. Of course, the situation here is knowing whether it's new underperformance or whether it's underperformance that they've never really performed. Fundamentally, though, they need clarity. You need to be directive in this sort of situation. We need to give people clarity about what is expected in terms of performance, and to a degree what's expected in terms of effort and energy and being proactive and those sort of things. So being clear about the behaviours that we expect to see. Obviously, if this has happened suddenly for somebody, then we need to understand what the cause is, because it's very likely there's something going on outside. If you've still got relatively low motivation but middling performance, for me that's about supporting the person, encouraging them, finding out, just again, coaching in a very supportive way, trying to get them to open up about what else is going on. And then if you go further right, so they are high performance, but you can see they really don't have high energy. For me, that's people who probably are flight risk or burnout risk. So they may be working really hard. I was saying they're tipping out, in danger of tipping into overwhelm and burnout, or they are bored. They are doing the job because they can do it really easily. They are comfort zoning. And what we need to do there is diagnose what's going on. Why do they feel so low energy? Is it about inspiring them in some way, which is the next level up? But find out what's causing that low motivation or energy. Is it internal or external? And see what we can do about it. Maybe they've missed out on a career move or something, and they've suddenly, demotivated and disillusioned. We can look to fix that, because if they continue to have that low motivation and energy, ultimately performance is going to slip back, or they're going to leave. So now if we go the next level up, so you can visualize we're looking across our middle set of boxes. So on the left hand side, we've got medium energy and motivation and low performance. Well, that's where you need to focus people. Maybe they've got distracted, they're quite enthusiastic, they're not really focusing their energy in the right places. So clear goals and objectives, and really, again, a more directive style, but making sure you're keeping them focused, taking away the distractions. They're not going and doing things that they want to do rather than the things they should do. They need to know what's important. Medium motivation and energy and medium performance, that is classic opportunity for feedback. So tell them what they're doing well, tell them what they could do even better. Be really specific about where performance is good and how it could be great. So make it really clear to them what they could do next. These people have got potential, so help to motivate them to be more energetic and motivated, but also to do more to perform better. They can do more with feedback. And then finally, if you've got someone who's got medium motivation and energy and high performance, I'd want to inspire them, help them understand how good they are, what they're doing, inspire them to really feel excited about the next thing. Maybe what can they do to the next level, or where do they want to go next? Because you want to keep their energy up and motivate it upwards, as opposed to getting it dropping back. And then finally, my top row, these people have got high energy. So finally, my top row, these people have got high energy and varying levels of performance. So if they've got low performance and high energy, it needs channeling. Maybe it's a new starter, they're really excited, but they don't really know what to do properly. So they probably need training. obviously they also need focusing training, but they probably need some level of training and development. If they've got medium performance, well, then that's where I'd say they need challenging. So asking the question, so how could you do this even better, faster next time? All right. So you help them be optimum, optimize their performance. So they're almost there. They've got the energy. So how could they optimize their performance? You carry on giving them more feedback, but you could coach them in a way. You might say, so how could you deliver an extra 20% with the same effort? What would challenge you further? So really good open question levels. What would take this to the next level? So thinking about that, how can you excite people to go even further and optimize? And finally, those people who are up there, make sure they're recognised. You maintain that energy and motivation. Recognise them, as we talked about intrinsic motivators previously, recognise them in a way that is going to help them feel that they are recharged. So you're helping to recharge that energy and maintain that high performance. Maybe they can support other people. Whatever it is that's going to work for them, make sure you don't just take it for granted and allow it to dip backwards. So, use that opportunity to recognise, maybe reward the high motivation and the high energy. So that grid, I just thought it might be useful for people to share that with managers. We can train people. You can think about how to use different coaching questions at different levels with this sort of grid. And it's quite a different way, maybe. Often managers might feel that they just coach in a certain way. But when you start mapping people, you think, they maybe fit in the training or they need refocusing. So you can use it as a diagnostic grid to think, what's the management style that I need to use to help re-energize performance? And that's the idea. So as I say, you can download it or you can access the webinar that I delivered. You'll be able to see an image of it there. So in short, what would I say we need to do in terms of this? The environment in 2024 is challenging for maximising performance, is what I think. Do let me know if you disagree. Motivation is multifaceted. It is linked to energy. So if we ignore this, or our managers ignore this, then I think we're risking burnout or low productivity. So why not think about individual needs in relation to motivation and energy and performance, and think about adapting your management or your coaching style to meet it, or that of your managers. Make sure you re-energize people. If there are needs for, wellbeing initiatives are still needed. People still need to renew their energy. If once you've diagnosed some of those causes of a low energy or underperformance, people might need extra support. So thinking about things like, are people renewing or re-energizing physically, emotionally, mentally, mindfully? So the different ways in which they can renew their energy, make sure that they think about those things. And for me, coaching is a key management skill that it's not just one size fits all. There are very many different ways in which you can act as a coach. You could be a more directive coach, you could be a more diagnostic coach, you can be a more challenging coach. And all of those skills are the way in which you can help people to manage their energy and, as I say, hopefully re-energize their own performance and maybe re-energize your own performance. So I hope you found that thought-provoking. Do get in touch. Thanks so much for listening in. And actually, we're doing quite a lot of training on this sort of thing. So do keep an eye out on our Actus, things that we send out on Actus, usually on LinkedIn. So we promote the courses that we're doing. So we're doing some management booster sessions on these sort of topics. So if you wanted to take this more widely into your organisation, get in touch. We might be able to run a booster session for you. Thanks for listening. I really hope you found this week's episode useful and enjoyable. If you did, perhaps you could recommend us to a friend or colleague, or give us a review on your platform of choice. It really helps new listeners to find us. Now you can access links to any of the information mentioned in this show via the website www.hruprising.com. Further free resources are also available at www.actus.co.uk. There you can also find out more about our software and training solutions. Finally, why not join our LinkedIn group, the HR Uprising, to share ideas and collaborate with other like-minded people professionals. Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast.